Classical Conversations presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortins, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today, we're going to be looking at homeschooling and some news articles that are worthy of our discussion today. The first one we'll talk about is in Michigan. They are trying to start a homeschool registry. And in Alaska, a judge has ruled that school choice dollars cannot go to homeschoolers. And Waco hosts the largest homeschool prom in their history, and we'll be talking about some of the experiences Chris and I had growing up homeschooling. So let's jump in. The first article we want to talk about is in Michigan. Officials differ on effects reasons for homeschool registry. Proponents want entry into the House State Board member says. And this bill in Michigan is one of, I believe, 11 states where homeschool families are not required to register, nor registering for parents of private school students. And media reports say Representative Kimberly Edwards, a Democrat, will be the sponsor. And she claims the bill will only require parents to check a box to inform their local district that their child is being homeschooled. And quote, "It's not saying it's going to track it," Edwards said, as quoted by Fox 47 News.
Okay, so what would be the point of hold on. So they're not going to track it, but they're going to track it. You got to check a box to let them know that you're homeschooling and you're opting out of the system, but they're not tracking that you're doing it. I'm failing to understand what's happening here.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. This is ridiculous. I mean, first of all, that a person like Representative Kimberly Edwards has been elected to serve, and she has this idea that she's going to have a box that you have to check, whether you're a private school student or a homeschool student. And she says that it's not going to be tracking it. So I don't even know how that would even work unless these documents are just placed in a bin somewhere and an individual from the state could go look at it. But saying that they're not going to track it is ridiculous on its face.
So what is exactly the incentive here? Are they trying to make sure that the kid, like, do they have testing requirements in Michigan? Is it similar to North Carolina where you have to go get your kids appraised by the state for their, educational utility?
Yeah, no, I think Michigan has almost complete homeschool and private school freedom. If the state doesn't know that you're homeschooling, then they can't really require anything of you. So I don't know the specific homeschool laws. I mean, they could have homeschool laws that require you to test, and you just keep it in your personal database for just in case it's needed in the future. But yeah, I believe in Michigan is one of the 11 free states for private education in our country at this time. So, I think a lot of people listening might be in states where they are required to register, and maybe they've not had any bad things happen yet. But this is obviously the first step, and I think they make it pretty clear here at the bottom of the article. But I wanted to talk about Rep. Jamie Green. She's a Republican in Richmond. She will actually be on the podcast later this year. We'll be talking about all things education and why she decided to run. But she said they see that every child missing from their district is money they would have in their district that they don't have, and they believe they deserve to have.
There it is.
So you can imagine that each school district can only receive money based on the number of students that they have. And so the more people they can get enrolled in public school, the more money they can get. And that's why I say we can get rid of the public schools in our country by just unenrolling our kids and getting them into private education. We can save half of our taxes if everyone started doing that tomorrow. So this is the other interesting thing that I wanted to point out. Senator Dianne Paul-Hankey, Democrat, says the purpose of the legislation is to account for all students, not to monitor them, and that's not a direct quote. But how are they going to account for them if they're not accounting? They told them they weren't going to track it. And accounting is just tracking.
Yeah, it sounds like scrolling up in the article, it says that during the pandemic, a lot of students weren't educated at all, and they just went missing from the system entirely. So they're saying this is a well being issue, that there are kids that are being unschooled. They're not going through any sort of a curriculum, and they're not
Mm.
receiving their indoctrination by the state. So either we want to make sure that we have you tagged so we can make our money off you from federal dollars, or we want to make sure that you're getting the proper education.
Yeah, could be. And I think that's important to know that that federal dollar, like when people say the state pays our taxes, no, the federal government is putting billions of dollars and we're $34 trillion in debt. So the federal government's involvement in education is not constitutional at all. That's why we need to end the Department of Education. Anyways, Tom McMillan, a Republican member of the State Board of Education, believes this bill is just the first step in a plan to regulate homeschoolers. It's going to go beyond registration, he said. They're either going to want to know exactly what's being taught or want entry into the home.
I like this final line at the end. While lawmakers can't agree on a purpose of a registry, so their intent, they want to have a registry. They just need to know how they can get people behind it.
It is crazy. Anyways, everyone, this is a great reason to be engaged with your state homeschool organization and to keep the eye on legislation because public pressure can definitely get things like this stopped. Now let's look at what's going on in Alaska. So, House and Senate aim to provide certainty for homeschool family after judge's ruling. And so, this is important for people to know. Alaska has had school choice for decades. As you can imagine, in Alaska, it's a very big state. A lot of people don't live, near other families, and so they've had, being able to do public school from home or just funds for education outside of what we would consider a public school building. And we've had personal experience with that here at Classical Conversations when we were naive, not really paying attention to what's going on because these dollars were just kind of located in Alaska and not really anywhere else. They would actually intercept our curriculum if it was paid for by the state dollars and take a marker and black out like the name of Jesus and Christian references and remove timeline cards that were of religious nature before providing those materials to the family. So we'd get really how we got alerted to this and how we got our names out of their kind of registry was a family emailed us and said they didn't receive all their cards. And why was that? And that's when we started digging in and getting alerted to this. So, a judge just recently said that this homeschooling allotment is unconstitutional. And for us, and really what Jesus said was build on rock, not on sand. And this is just another example that state dollars are sand. They can be allocated one year and removed the next. And imagine you build a life on begging the government on an annual basis not to remove what effectively is a welfare check. And so that's not the life I want to live. That's not the life I want you to live. And that's why we fight so hard here for private education, because that's really the only way to be free is to be free of government strings. So I think here is where the rubber meets the road. The State Board of Education, with regulates education in Alaska, would be directed to create a more rigid approval program for course materials to ensure they're constitutional, Tobin said. The board is next scheduled to meet in June. So here it is, everyone. The school choice movement will tell you that strings do not get attached to the money. Right here in Alaska, they're doing it as we speak. And of course, as someone who is a conservative and wants our tax dollars to be spent well, I believe our tax dollars should have strings on it. And it's ridiculous that these so called conservatives are saying that they shouldn't. They are betraying our core values. And when you betray your core values, you have nothing to stand on. Again, building on the sand instead of the rock. And so absolutely crazy right now, what's going on in Alaska.
I'm actually I am cautiously optimistic that this sort of a hard tacked approach from the state will actually backfire on them. I think typically in history, when you see religious oppression of any kind, people don't just pack it up and go away and stop believing in their God. They tend to get a little more zealous about it. So the state taking this really strong approach and saying, we don't want to have any religious studies in our schools, and if you're going to privately educate, publicly educate, no God allowed. I think it's going to backfire on them. I think people are going to get a lot more serious and intentional about catechizing their children because of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. And there's also Supreme Court decisions that might indicate that this lower court's judge decision will be overturned. But part of having a king or a god is that you're looking for them for your sustenance and not something else. And so imagine, not going home to eat the food that your wife has prepared for dinner, but going to some other woman's house and eating her dinner. And that's effectively what Christians who claim Christ as their king do when they go to the government for funding for their educational purposes. So, yeah, this might get overturned, or maybe there's an uproar, or a law is passed, or a constitutional amendment is put in there so that this money can be spent on private Christian education. But God told the church to serve others, not to be served, that the least of these will be the most in heaven. And when we are demanding our neighbors pay for our child's education, we are not serving others, we're demanding they serve us. And so I think, irregardless of how this turns out, it's just another point in the fact that it is not a slippery slope argument. It is the truth. School choice dollars for private Christian education endangers Christian education, and we should not build our lives around these dollars, especially when we see our country hurtling off an economic cliff. But it's not all bad news, folks. Waco's largest homeschool prom draws over 250 kids from across central Texas. Of course, Texas does not currently have school choice. It shows that you do not need school choice to have success in homeschooling and for people to get together. But I really just wanted to talk about here, Chris, is that idea. What about socialization? And I know growing up, I played a lot of sports. We were involved in church. We were involved in debate clubs and public speaking and all sorts of different things. But I wanted to hear, Chris, from you. What are some of the ways that you were socialized growing up? And did you go to a homeschool prom?
So I never went to a homeschool prom. Um, we did what we called protocol. So we would attend either a symphony or we would go out to like a really nice dinner and practice etiquette, and then we would go to see like Much Ado About Nothing, one of the Shakespeare plays, and we played different rhetoric games and activities. Those it's not exactly like a prom. We weren't dancing with the other sex and socializing to like have a little courtship or whatever. It was all about the academics of it. And so and that's just one of the things, right? So like you said, we had debate tournaments, we had different sports that we attended. There was no barrier to being able to interact with peers as a homeschooler. My parents were very intentional about making sure that I had a lot of friends.
Yeah, I did not go to a homeschool prom. They did have one. I think it may have been the second year the state had one. Our state homeschool group was throwing on one. I don't remember if they called it a prom or end of year celebration or something like that. So that was, well, I'm going to age myself, but over 20 years ago. They've had these type of activities for a long time in the States. I was actually dating a girl who went to a local public school at the time. And so we went to her prom my senior year. For us, my parents were, like you said, really intentional about getting us socialized, because that was the big question of the day. Or homeschoolers going to be socially awkward? Were we going to be able to find someone of the opposite sex to marry and have kids, because that was kind of a new thing back then.
And if I can just jump in for a second and challenge the idea of what is socialization? What are we hoping to achieve by socializing our students? A lot of times it's this idea of, oh, they have to be in a peer group of like-minded individuals the same age, but that's almost an abomination. If you want to socialize someone to the norms of society, you should want them interacting with people that are already engaged in society. And if you send a whole bunch of kids to hang out with other kids, what are they learning but how to be kids? Um, and so if I'm thinking, what do I want from my children right now? I want them to hang out with adults. I want them to be able to understand what it means to be a man, to grow up to be an adult. Those are the kinds of things that they're not going to get by hanging out with other 5-year-olds.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say we want our children to be civilized, not socialized. And a lot of people don't understand that early on, homeschooling wasn't even legal in all 50 states. Again, why you need to be involved with your state legislators and make sure that you're paying attention to what your state orgs are putting out, because there is going to be overreach. That's the definition of government.
We're only one generation out with this freedom, and it's so easy to start taking for granted these things, because in my life it's been legal the entire time, but not for yours, Robert.
Yep. And so we did have to hide. If UPS was coming to the door, we had to go to the basement or go to the back of the house, because, if they reported you to child services, it could, really just be an emotionally traumatic time for the adults and the kids involved. And so, kids are definitely being involved in a lot of things these days for homeschooling. There's more opportunity than ever before. And whether you're my generation or Chris's generation, I think Chris nailed it. We want our kids to be around adults who are mature Christians who behave in a manner worthy of, being copied. And that's really what true civilization is all about. And I just challenge people, is like, okay, when are you in a room with 30 people your exact same age from your zip code? I was talking about this on X. Someone was asked, well, what about, diversity? And I said, hey, some bureaucrat who drew some zip code lines doesn't equal diversity. I mean, if anything, you can have a less diverse type of populace than what you see in a public school, because it's just determined by bureaucrats who you're hanging out with, and it's a bunch of people your exact same age. So that's not true diversity at all. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. It is important that we're always vigilant, and we can see how allowing the state get involved in our lives does not make them better. And homeschoolers are civilized. We have opportunities like prom, sports, academics, all sorts of different things to get involved with people we want our children to grow up to be like, not people who are segregated by zip code and by age. And so if you enjoyed today's episode, again, share it with a friend. Follow me on X, The Robert B Show, or Robert the Homeschooler. I'm getting much more involved there, talking about what we're talking about here. And we'll see you next week. God bless. Listening to our podcast is a wonderful way to get better at classical education, but really the best way is to practice together in community. At Classical Conversations, we have our 2024 practicum events coming up across the world, and especially if you're listening in the United States, in your local community. We want to help you become a better everyday educator. And in 2024, we're talking about math, and we're going to be using our wonderful brand new curriculum, the Math Map, to have table talk discussions led by trained parents, trained home educators in a one-day math boot camp that is going to help you understand and love math, even if you're not a math person. And math really helps us to understand God more fully. To find out when your local practicum meets, just visit ccpracticum.com. That's ccpracticum.com. And if you go to my podcast, Refining Rhetoric, episode 94, My mom and I talk all about the Math Map curriculum and how it helps you to see God. Go listen to that in preparation for this year's Parent Practicum. Then go to ccpracticum.com to register today. Now let's jump back into the show.
Welcome to Classical Crypto with Will. Such a pleasure to be with you today. Before we dive into our main topic, we're going to play a couple scenes with some national characters, and we're going to kind of compare what they're saying now to what they said 2 years ago. But before that, a quick market watch update. Bitcoin now, we are post-halving. We have not moved. We've kind of been consolidating between the $60,000 to $67,000 level, bouncing back and forth. Looks like it's a big consolidation range. Next, if we're taking off, it looks like the price could go to $75K. If we break it down, it could go as far down as $52,000. Now, I'm not worried either way. And this is why. Most people think when that halving comes, it's liftoff, it's blast off, and the supply crunch is happening right away. That is not true. Historically, if you go back to the last 3 to 4 cycles of halving, Bitcoin doesn't even take off for 2 to 3 months after that halving has taken place. It takes a while for that supply shock to be felt, to be absorbed, and to kind of meet the market where it's at and to affect the price. So this is not financial advice about anything right now. I could say 75, it could go up to 75, and it could break that trend, and that would be great. Look at the data yourselves and prepare one way or another. That said, let's revisit this scene from former President Donald Trump. Now, 3 years ago, he was poo-pooing crypto. Oh, I like the dollar, want it strong. And though his stance on a strong dollar has not gone anywhere, this scene from Trump will raise your eyebrows as he is now taking a pro-crypto stance going into this 2024 election. Check this out.
Thank you for the statement. Yeah, with the goggles on.
Goggles.
One of the smartest people in crypto
That's with the goggles on. He's a funny dude, man.
are moving their businesses out of the U.S. because they're scared of the U.S.'s regulations. Because of the hostility. Correct. Yeah, crypto is moving out of the U.S. because of hostility toward crypto. Correct. So what are you going to do to stop it? Well, we'll stop it because I don't want that. I want that. If we're going to embrace it, we have to let them be here.
Yes, sir.
Oh, dude.
Next, we have the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, talking about Bitcoin. Now, even he admits it in this video 2 years ago, he was bad-mouthing Bitcoin all over town. Again, he's friends with all those big guys who were saying, hey, this is rat poison, get out, don't touch it. He's now accepting it with open arms, saying it is a flight to safety, saying that they are going to tokenize every asset that they have, and that Bitcoin is not going to be a currency, but will be a store of value. And this is a change in the narrative. Check this scene out.
How big a deal is that for BlackRock? And this was for you a big switch as well, because you were a naysayer for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I probably switched for the first 3 years of thinking about it. I was a naysayer, and about 2 years ago, I switched. And I'm actually, as I said in the last 2 years, I'm a big believer.
Are you a believer personally? Meaning, is the Fink family a Bitcoin buyer or a buyer of this new ETF?
Well, now I can do that. I cannot, I don't want to compete with our clients, so I don't buy single assets. I'll buy mutual funds. I'll buy single ETFs. So I have an opportunity to do that now. But I'm a believer in it because I do believe it is an alternative source for wealth holding. I don't believe it's ever going to be a currency. I believe it's an asset class.
You don't believe it ever becomes a currency?
No, I think we are going to create digital currencies. We're going to use the technology for it. We're going to use the blockchain.
Now for our final scene, we're going to look at the House of Representatives, and we're going to see what Democratic Representative Maxine Waters had to say about this latest bill that came up about crypto regulations. And as that scene with Donald Trump that you just saw, when he said, hey, this is now a Republican versus Democrat issue, you'll see now that the Democrats have posed Maxine Waters as the voice to stop crypto or to add stifling regulations, the same regulations that are driving crypto companies out of the U.S. Now, Maxine Waters doesn't have much grounds to stand on other than she's waving Biden's veto flag. Thankfully, this bill has passed the House, is going to Congress, Apparently, it will not pass Biden's veto, but at least we're making some progress. Check this scene out.
To enter into the record a statement of administrative policy from the White House. The president states that the resolution before us would, quote, disrupt the Securities and Exchange Commission's work to protect investors in crypto asset markets. The President of the United States of America will veto it.